Okay, this is Notes 4.1, Causes of the Cold War, for Ms. Richardson and Mr. Culhane's U.S. History class. So some background about the causes, some things that we've already reviewed, but things for you to know. Soviet Union and the United States were both very new superpowers. Remember, they both end up with nuclear weapons. The U.S. got it first. We'll talk a little bit about this in class, but you have to remember that. They are also very different with political and economic systems. Remember, the Soviet Union is communist and also a dictatorship. The U.S. is capitalist, and we believe in democracy, or we have a republic. So when you look at those things and you think about those, we really basically have two completely opposing views that we're promoting. And when we do that, that means we have conflicting post-war goals as well. And that's going to make a difference in post-war Europe. So we both have a say in what's happening in Europe. We want two totally different things. This is going to create a problem. So what are these post-war goals and these conflicting ideas? Well, the Americans want freedom and democracy. Here we go. We want these countries to have independence. We want basically all of Europe, all the areas that Germany had already taken over, to be free, to be able to choose their own governments and to have democracies in them. We really want to promote our ideas. So many of the countries that are in question are Eastern European countries, because the Soviet Union does not necessarily want American ideas in Eastern Europe buffering them. They want countries that have economic and political systems that are similar to their systems there in that place. So then we look at the Soviet view, which I've kind of started into. So the Soviets have a reason for this. They lost 20 million men in World War II, more than any other country, including Germany. So if you think about, we talked a little bit about the Battle of Stalingrad, the freezing and all of that. So the Soviet Union had more people, but they also lost more people. So they really want to try to rebuild and make the country strong. So Stalin is the leader, and he decides he can make the country strong by establishing these things called satellite nations. And a satellite nation, and the definition is here, is a nation on the Soviet border that the Soviet Union basically controls. So a satellite nation is a country like the Ukraine or something like that, where the Soviet Union actually puts the government in charge of it. So it's not part of the Soviet Union. They say it's a different country, but they totally are sympathetic to the Soviet Union and have the same goals, the same type of government, and the Soviet Union really controls their government. These are totalitarian governments that are going to support communism. They are going to be very similar to Stalin's government, therefore he feels safe with them buffering him. Sometimes they're also called buffer nations, by being between him and Western Europe. So satellite nations, because if you think a satellite is something that is around something else, so satellites orbit the Earth, they go around it, or a buffer nation. So here you can see on the map the satellite nations. Those are these countries here. See them? I just circled them for you. So you've got the Soviet Union over here, but then all of these countries kind of buffer. So we've got Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Eastern Germany. They're going to buffer or be satellite nations for the Soviet Union between Western Europe over here and the Soviet Union. So it makes them feel safer. So the underlying causes, so causes that are kind of underneath of the Cold War, really come down to American distrust of the Soviet government. We don't trust them. Remember the Yalta Conference. We met with the Soviet Union and with Great Britain. Remember, it was Stalin, FDR, and Churchill. We all met together and we made some agreements, and it was before the end of the war, if you remember that. So maybe you even remember with this picture. So we have Churchill here. Whoops, I just drew on Churchill's face. Churchill, who is from Great Britain, he was the prime minister. We have FDR right here in the middle. He was still alive then, and here's Stalin here on the right. So a very famous picture. We've got the so Great Britain, the US, the Soviet Union, all together, all working to try to come up with a plan for peace after World War II. But remember, this is before the war actually ended, but we knew we were going to win. So if we come back to this, the Yalta Conference, Stalin promised Poland gets free elections. So we got something with Poland. The Declaration of a Liberated Europe, which gave all European countries, and especially Eastern European countries, free elections. They got to choose their own governments. Well, that's going to change, right? We can see that that's happening. That's not the Soviets' goal. And it's going to divide up Germany and Berlin into 4 zones. The country that was not at the Yalta Conference that got a zone was France. So we had the US, the Soviet Union, Great Britain, and France each had a zone of Germany and of Berlin. And FDR and Stalin, like I said, different goals, have some disagreements, but Stalin respected FDR. Well, now we know FDR died before the end of the war, so once these things have to go in place, it's not FDR that Stalin is dealing with. So if we look back at this picture again, we know that it's going to turn out differently. We know these countries don't have free elections. We see East Germany, West Germany. Guess what? They split them up. West Germany, if you notice, it's much bigger here. It's all this, I'll color it all yellow here. West Germany is really big. West Germany is actually a combination of the US, Great Britain, and France's portions. And then East Germany is the Soviet Union's portion. So, like I said, Truman takes control. Franklin Roosevelt died. Truman, who was his vice president, takes over. He's very anti-communist and does not get along with Stalin. So then we have the Potsdam Conference that happens. So the war is over. We're making decisions. Things are being finalized. And here you can see a very similar picture to the last one. We have Churchill again here on the left. Here's Truman in the center, Stalin on the right. This is taken from the Potsdam Conference. So we still have the 3 same countries, the big 3, are meeting there, but it goes very differently because Stalin does not like Truman. So, like we said, he and Stalin problems were at the Potsdam Conference in July of 1945, so this is after the war actually ended, and they're trying to work out a deal. The big thing that they're looking at Potsdam is Germany, what to do about Germany. So we've got Truman's position, we've got Stalin's position. Truman thinks that Germany should not be punished. He thinks that Germany is very important, huge central country, very important to the success of Europe and Europe recovering from this war. They've got industry, they've got resources. He doesn't want to punish them. Stalin wants to punish them. He wants them to pay for the war. He wants to pay the Soviet Union so that the Soviet Union has the ability to recover from World War II. So they come up with this deal between Truman and Stalin. So the Soviets get their reparations. However, they don't really punish Germany. So they trade and they get their reparations through trade with the US and Great Britain, not from Germany. So this allows Germany to help the rest of Europe recover. But Stalin's not really happy with this because he also wanted to punish Germany for what? I mean, remember we said 20 million Soviets were killed by the Germans in this war, and so he's upset. So we have even more tension coming up. More tension is eventually going to lead to a split between the countries. So Potsdam, the result, increased tension. And we have this thing called the Iron Curtain that descends in Europe. So what's this Iron Curtain? It's actually a term that is coined by Truman. And if you look at the map, you see it really is just talking about there's 2 sides in Europe. And we can see this line down the center here. On the right side, or on the eastern side, you have the Soviet Union, their allies, and they basically cut themselves off of Western Europe, the United States allies. So on the western side, or on the left of the map, the western side, you have the US allies, the democratic capitalist countries. On the eastern side, you have the more dictatorships and communist countries that Russia is allied with. And the 2 don't trade with each other, don't talk to each other. They become very unfriendly, and it really becomes this cold relationship between the 2 that really creates tension. So Stalin ends up refusing to acknowledge the Declaration of Liberated Europe. He refuses to allow free elections. Very important. So these things that he agreed to before, he actually backs out on, creates the satellite nations, and creates essentially two Europes, the Eastern and Western Europes. This is going to cause the Cold War because now you've got two sides right up against each other. There's tension, they're upset, they distrust each other, and both sides have access to nuclear weapons. So you're very, very nervous. And that is the essential causes of the Cold War. If you have questions, make sure you bring them to class. We will talk about these in class and go into more depth.